Like a lot of top animators, Linda Miller knew what her professional life path was going to be from an early age. In 1964, she viewed part of Fantasia on a round-tube color TV and was hooked. Animation was where she needed to be. 2 years of studying art history in Malibu and Heidelberg, Germany at Pepperdine University was followed by 2 more years at Art Center. One of Linda's instructors, Disney layout artist Guy Deal, pointed her toward the House of Mouse, and Miss Miller was soon ensconced in the studio's feature animation department, where she worked on Pete's Dragon, The Small One, and The Fox and the Hound in rapid succession. Don Bluth, Gary Goldman, and John Pomeroy resigned from Disney's animation department in 1979, and Linda was the first animator to follow them out the studio's doors and on to a decade of storyboarding and animating on features that included Secret of Nim, Land Before Time, and American Tail, among many others. Miss Miller moved on to television animation and video feature work in the 90s and 21st century, and today works for Disney Television Animation. We spoke in the conference room of the Animation Guild on November 2nd, 2011. We are talking on November 2nd to Linda Miller, and Linda started in the industry back in the glory days of the 1970s. And Linda, how did you get interested in going into animation in the first place?
Well, you know that bit in The Empire Strikes Back where Darth Vader tells Luke that it's his destiny to rule the galaxy.
Mm-hmm.
It was kind of my destiny to go to work for Walt Disney.
And why was that?
My father, who loved cartoons, when I was 5 or 6, something like that, and unfortunately this tells everybody how old I am. Back when stuff like the Flintstones and Rocky and Bullwinkle were on in prime time, we used to watch these shows together, and he loved cartoons. His nickname was Mickey, so he had this Mickey Mouse drawing on the side of this converted bread truck that he used to carry around his drapery installing equipment in. And I realized at a pretty early age that the thing was off model. Yeah, I was like, what is
That's
wrong
a
with
mark
this?
of either a cleanup artist or an animator.
Yes.
One of the two.
Yeah, so I heard my father say fairly often that he thought it would be a really cool thing if his daughter, who was being recognized for an ability to draw as early as like the 2nd grade.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That early? Yeah, you're like a lot of
Oh, yeah.
animation guys and gals that I talk to. They started drawing in elementary school and never stopped.
Yes, unless their teachers made them stop. But my father was sophisticated enough to know that his daughter could make a living drawing little cartoons for Walt Disney.
Really?
Yes.
When did he first decide that this was going to be where you would end up?
It was sort of always, it was always there as far back as I can remember, because he liked cartoons. He was a musician. He could draw himself, and being in California, being where the Disney studio was.
Where did you grow up?
I grew up here. I'm a Valley girl.
Oh, so you're from the San Fernando Valley?
Yes.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So we go back to Darth Vader. I really did grow up conscious of a place where people could draw cartoons.
Yeah.
And make these movies. And what clinched it for me was my Uncle Lee, bought one of the early color television sets, like around 1964.
Yeah, yeah.
And we were over at his house. We were just leaving, and the TV was on, and there was a promo for the Disney Wonderful World of Color.
Oh, yeah.
And I mean, it was like, this is what we're going to see next week, when I wouldn't happen to be sitting in front of a color TV because we didn't have one.
Yeah, black and
And
white.
yeah, but there was this clip of the Pastoral Symphony sequence from Fantasia. So
In color.
in color, with the the herd of flying horses that passes overhead and lands in the lagoon or whatever that is. And that was like, I want to do that.
Was that like sort of when
That
you
was
thought,
the
boom, the magical moment?
aha moment, as the psychologists would
Yeah.
call it. Yeah.
So yours was looking at a color TV, not in a theater.
Yeah, I hadn't actually seen Fantasia before then. I saw it not too long after that, because it was released for a short run in '64, and they took like classes of school children to see it
Yeah, yeah.
at the Grauman's Chinese Theater. So the theater itself was
So you
a
went to see
big
it.
deal. Yes,
So
and
seeing it on the big screen must have been awe-inspiring.
it was. Yeah.
So your course was set, as they say, when you saw it on television and then in a theater. You
Yes.
said, that's what I'm going to do.
Yes, and unlike a lot of people in my field, I didn't have to argue about it. Both my parents understood that people could have jobs in what was essentially commercial art and not starve.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And that's always useful.
Yeah,
Because they were on your side. They weren't.
Yeah, well, yeah, my dad was. My mother still thought that law school was the best, was the best deal, but luckily I had, because I'm also a nerd, so I managed to get an academic scholarship that would fund whatever college I wanted to go to for 4 years.
And where did you go?
Well, it's complicated. I wanted to go to Cal Arts, but at the time I applied, I didn't have a portfolio,
Oh,
so I couldn't get in. So I
Really?
figured, let's go somewhere for 2 years, and then I'll try again to get into an art school, and I'll take those 2 years, get all my academics out of the way. So I ended up going to Pepperdine.
oh, okay.
And that was the first year they had their Malibu campus. So
You were out by the bounding Pacific.
yeah, it was nice. Also because the campus wasn't quite finished, so it wasn't quite as locked down as it was in subsequent years.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and the second year I qualified for their. They had a small program set that was based in Heidelberg. So I wanted to go to Europe. I wanted to see all the stuff in those museums. So I spent a year in Heidelberg.
So were you a lit major, an art major, a combination?
I was an art major. I was an art history major because they, the irony was they didn't really have an art program.
Wow.
So it was kind of, studying whatever one would study in a year of liberal arts, and looking at as many pictures as I could.
But were you doing a lot of drawing, or were you mainly looking
I was
at pictures of-
mostly looking at stuff. I had notebooks, but again, nothing that would actually qualify as a portfolio.
Were
Which
you, were you a compulsive sketcher?
Yeah. I still kind of regret that I managed to lose one of my notebooks
really?
right after going through the Prado. I left it in a park in Madrid.
Oh, that's too bad.
Yeah, it's a drag,
You had a
but
lot of stuff in it, probably, huh?
yeah, but you get so used to disposing of your drawings anyway.
Yeah.
That's sort of the wonderful thing about working digital. Instead of instead of the box of discards, you can just
Blink.
blink. Yeah, just click and it's gone.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So-
So 2 years of that, and
So you were at Pepperdine for 2 years?
yes.
Okay.
And
Then
then-
where were you off to?
Well, then I transferred to Art Center.
Oh, okay.
And that was kind of funny too, because again, I had no portfolio, so the first time I applied, I didn't get in. But the counselor that I talked to suggested that since what they really wanted to see was life drawing, why don't I take a Saturday class
Yeah.
and get some practice with drawing the live model. And Pepperdine, being a Christian school, what wasn't going to have naked people sitting around in classrooms anyway.
Yeah.
So
Do you think that the 2 years of art history and observing, and then moving to Art Center with, I'm assuming, 2 or 3 more years of doing, drawing, and all that, was a good way to go?
Well, I don't know if it was a good way to go, but it's the way I went. As it happened, the gentleman who was teaching the class that I ended up taking was the head of the department I wanted to get into, which was illustration at the time, because Art Center made no bones about it being a trade school.
Yeah, yeah.
And after a few weeks, he looked at what I was doing in the class and said, why aren't you in the day school? And I said, well, you guys wouldn't let me in. So,
Well, he was impressed with your drawing.
yeah, he liked what I was doing in the class, so he took me around and got me signed up. So when the next semester started, I was a regular student. And
Okay, so you did 1 semester at night.
yeah.
And then, were you working during the day, or were you
No.
drawing during the day, or what were you?
No, I was living at home, so
Back in the valley.
yeah, and the first year actually it was still in Hollywood, and then the whole campus moved to the one in Pasadena.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
So in 4 years, I spent successively 4 different places.
Wow.
Yeah, so.
Wait a minute, you were at,
I was at Pepperdine,
Pepperdine,
in Malibu, then
Malibu.
Pepperdine in Heidelberg, then
oh
Art
yeah,
Center
okay,
in
so
Hollywood.
you were in
and
Heidelberg for how long?
for an academic year, 8 months.
Oh, so for the whole, I thought it was a semester.
Ah.
That's amazing. So, 2 physical locations with one college and 2 physical locations with the other college.
Yeah.
Well, Heidelberg was probably a little more interesting than Pasadena.
Well, yeah. Pasadena didn't have a bunker in the backyard. It was a pretty strange house.
Yeah.
Apparently, during the war, it had been occupied by the Wehrmacht, and then it'd been occupied by the Americans.
Oh, I see.
So, and the room that I stayed in, which was the only single room in the house, had actually been a cell.
Yeah.
It had bars on the windows and a metal door, and we could never get anyone to explain to us whose army actually built it.
Maybe the Imperial German Army from World War One.
Well, possibly. It had a kind of a 30s look to it, although the house itself was very old. And, of course, I am making jokes about gas nozzles as soon as I see it.
Yeah. I'm sure they were thrilled.
Because I'm like that.
So,
Being the lone Jew in a house with 40, well, I no longer call them Jesus freaks, but, you know, it was a Christian school, so they were all, you know, fairly devout people.
There probably weren't a lot of Jews at the school at the time you were there.
It was me,
And maybe.
and that was it, yeah.
Hmm.
So, you know, if one doesn't have a persecution complex, one develops one, you know, even, you know, these were not people that were getting, you know, on my case about not being a Christian, especially.
Well, that's good.
Yes, but, you know, if you wanted to get away from all the praying, all there is outside is Germany.
Yeah, well,
Yes.
it's a nice choice. But getting back to Art Center, so you were there. Were you there until you finished the program, or how did that work?
No, I was there until I ran out of money, which
That
took
often
about
happens.
about 3 semesters. But the important thing was that the last semester I took a class from a man named Guy Deal.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Who was at Disney?
exactly. And one day he brought in these very strange drawings that were all in blue, and they were all very long. You know, they were layout drawings, which I'd never seen before.
Yeah, yeah.
And he told the class about the Disney training program, which had just started up. This was like 1977.
Yeah, yeah. You've been
And they
around
were-
off and on for
Yeah.
a little bit.
Yeah, so
think-
this was like the end of Rescuers.
Yeah, Dale Bear was one of the first, and that was 4 or 5 years before.
Yeah.
I think right when you came, they were just kicking into sort of high gear.
Yeah, they'd given it over to Eric Larson.
Yeah.
So, this was, you know, like, this was unlocking the door for me because every time I had called up any of the local studios, it was always, we're not, you know, we're not really looking for new people. We're, you know, animation is a dying art, kid. Why do you even want to go into it?
Thank you. We'll talk to you later.
Yes, exactly.
So Guy was your sort of doorway into
Yes,
Disney.
after the class, I you know, grabbed him by the collar and said, "Who do I talk to?" So he gave me the guy, the name of a guy named Don Duckwall.
Great name.
A wonderful name, you know, a perfect name. And I called him up and arranged for an interview, and I came in with, I think, every second drawing that I had done in those 3 semesters. It was literally the worst portfolio in Art Center history.
Really?
Art Center, they were set up to turn out hack illustrators. I was, you know, taking the hack illustrator course.
Yeah, yeah.
So I was expected to have a portfolio that would be 12 slides in an immaculate leather binder. What I had was a pile of drawings about this thick, about a foot thick, you know, great big ones, little notebooks, you know, just...
And that's what you submitted to Disney.
Yes, and I sat there in Don Duckwall's office for an hour, a literal hour,
Yeah.
as he went through every damn drawing. And then he called Eric Larson, and he came down from the 2nd floor, and he looked at every damn drawing. And, you know, so I'm sitting there with these 2 gentlemen for 2 hours. And at the end, they say, well, we'll submit this to the review board, and you'll probably hear from us in a week.
Oh, okay.
So, all right. So I go home. Actually, I heard from them the next day.
Oh, okay. That
Because-
was quick.
It was quick, and I don't think it was because I was so damn talented. It just happened that I came in on a Wednesday, and the review board always met on a Thursday.
Oh, so they said,
So
Oh,
they said,
okay.
yeah,
She'll
she
do.
obviously likes to draw.
So you started the following Monday?
No, I started, I think, something like 6 weeks later, because I was still in school.
Oh, okay.
So I started when the semester ended. So
But you could have started the next Monday.
yeah, conceivably. But, the important thing was that I didn't have that interval of waitressing.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so I lucked out then, and by that time, actually, I had already moved out and was living in Hollywood with my sister.
Oh, okay.
So, there were lots and lots of reasons why it was a good idea to get a job.
Yeah, well, sure.
Yeah.
Sis probably would like you to pay some of the rent.
Yeah, that kind of thing.
So, so you started Disney. What was your first impression of the place? Because you started in 1977.
Yes.
And it's sort of the hotbed of Don Bluth is there at the time, and they're probably still doing Pete's Dragon, or was that done?
They were coming in, I think, at about the tail end of it.
Yeah, yeah.
And it took me some time to sort of figure out, the dynamic of the place. Part of my experience was coming in as somebody from the wrong school.
Art Center was the wrong. There were quite a few people there from.
There
Art
were a
Center,
lot
weren't
of
there?
people, who came in from Art Center, and, most of them ended up going with Don because there was a bit of a class system there. You know, Cal Arts was sending them people like John Musker, Ron Clements, Jerry Reese, Brad Bird, that Lassiter kid.
Yeah, he came in '79, so
Yeah.
he came in 2 years after you
Yeah,
did.
they all came in kind of as a bunch, and it was
They came in. I remember them coming in waves,
yeah,
and it was real interesting.
yeah, immensely talented, and they were the ones who would be following up Frank and Ollie, who at this point were still working. It was explained that, oh, well, these guys are from Cal Arts, so they're going to be working with Frank and
They
Ollie.
go over here.
Yes, so all you other guys who didn't go to the right school, you'll get on with it.
So who did you mentor under?
Really, it was Don. It was Don and John and Gary Goldman, because Pete's Dragon was Don's picture, and so was the small one, which
Right.
followed it up. So, it wasn't so much a loyalty issue, but I was being directed by Don, and he had a great influence on the training course that Walt Stanchfield was.
Right. Because Walt was there doing
Yes.
that then.
Yes, I called him Obi-Wan, as he was always talking about animating forces rather than lines.
And he always looked like he was in such great shape, always out
Yes.
there on the tennis court, bronze, and
Yeah,
he was an amazing dude.
he was, and there are things that you take away stuff from some teachers, and I learned an immense amount from Walt. And at Art Center, I had a drawing teacher named Peter Liashkov,
Mm-hmm.
who his method was different from Harry Carmian, who I never had him for a drawing teacher, and he was kind of he was kind of the drawing god over there. But I always thought that Liashkov was a better teacher,
Yeah.
because he was very good at explaining how to look at positive and negative space and how to measure,
Oh, okay.
which was in life drawing. That's everything. I mean, that's the whole purpose of life drawing is
But in
to
animation,
yeah, you're doing yes is and it's absolutely the same, except that in animation your model is in your head,
yeah.
but you're still having to make those same choices.
So, what you're learning from Walt, and your mentor is Don. And so, what's the first production that you're assigned to? Are you on the Fox and the Hound, or
That actually
the small one?
that actually came later. I was an in-betweener and a cleanup artist on Pete's Dragon.
Oh, okay. So you did make it on the Pete's Dragon.
Yes, it's very funny actually. I was doing these great big close-ups for Dale Oliver, and lovely man.
World War II glider pilot.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, he was. He was. We'll speak of this later, but
Yeah.
I'm interrupting you.
Yeah.
Of Elliot, were you? You were doing
Yeah.
close-ups of
Yes.
Elliot?
It's this. It's this song where the live action kid and the dragon are singing this song, and for most of it, the dragon is in a moving hold. So we're having to turn out these, drawing after drawing of, this big head that's not really doing anything, and it has to be rock solid. And I was getting about one drawing a day done. So he came up to my room to see what I was doing.
This is
and-
Dale.
Yeah, to see if he could jolly me along a little faster. And I said, I see people doing this thing, flipping the drawing, and I'll bet it would help me if I could do that, because I'm just trying to use the bottom light. The problem was I'm left-handed, so I was having a hard time interpreting what these guys were doing. And he threw up his hands and hoarse, "You're left-handed!
Oh, no.
You have no future in animation."
That's just what Larry Clemens was told by Walt Disney, because he was left-handed. He said,
Yes.
no left-hander ever makes it in animation.
No, of course.
In Larry's case, he was, in your case, wrong, in his case, right.
Yeah. Well, what Dale explained to me was that I would crumple the paper on the wrong side, and animators wouldn't want me to assist them. So I did learn to flip a drawing and to roll the drawings, and I also learned how to do it without crumpling the paper.
There you
so
go.
that people
So
would not.
Your future was assured.
Yeah, so that's I learned not to manhandle the paper, although I am reminded of there were people who could not, and I do remember one time poor Will Finn was trying to clean up. I think it was a Glen Keane scene to make his drawings of the Fox and the Hound look like John Pomeroy's. And this is a very thankless task, and I seem to remember that Will was trying so hard to match this
Yeah.
that he actually erased through the paper, which is hard to do in that thick Disney paper.
Yeah, I
But-
can imagine.
Yeah, but I really had no future in cleanup was more the issue. You need a meticulousness and a focus on detail that I just didn't have.
Yeah, yeah.
So I was so I had to animate. You know, that's all there was for it.
Now, I remember from that period, you became a really solid animator really fast. Didn't you animate on the birds? You animated on the sparrow, the
In
little guy?
yeah, I had quite a few of those scenes. I did a lot of chickens. Lorna Cook, I think she was still Lorna Pomeroy then, and I designed all manner of chickens for this sequence
Yeah.
where the dogs and the are running through a chicken yard. The punchline of which was that they ended up painting them all white.
And you had designed them to be a darker hue?
Well, we had designed them to be lots and lots of different colors because chickens are a whole universe of color.
Right, but they didn't do that.
They didn't do that. They said, make them white. What the hell? So that way they could see the dogs. So I suppose in that sense it was a practical decision. Although if they had said beforehand, we're going to make them white, so don't go nuts. It would have taken us a little less time.
So how long were you in cleanup before you segued over to animation?
Oh, maybe somewhere between probably about a year.
Really?
Yeah, it took about a year and a half from the time I got in the company until I actually was promoted to animator. So I think I started getting scenes at the beginning of the small one.
Oh, okay.
I showed a couple of tests to Don, and he sort of saw me as someone who could start getting scenes.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
He said, you've got it. But now, at the same time you were starting on a small one,
Yeah.
weren't you also working on Don's garage project?
No, I wasn't.
Banjo? You weren't at that time.
I did not know.
He
No.
didn't invite you on until later, or how did that work?
Well, he must have known that I had a knack for animation, because the first thing they do is give you a test. They put you in a room with a lot of paper and an X sheet, which of course nobody has ever shown me before. Oh, what's this? Uh, and Eric, he gives you some very minimal instruction, about how to, where to put your numbers, that kind of thing, and we're going to give you a month, animate something for us.
So what was your first animation?
Well,
I mean, your first test?
it's a little hard to explain, and it was probably a little, a little hard for them to quite grasp. But I had done a comic strip when I was in college,
Oh, okay.
and some of the characters that I was already familiar with drawing.
So they were your characters?
Yes, they were kind of caricatures. A little medieval guy who looked a lot like Art Garfunkel,
Oh, okay.
being pursued by a kind of funny-looking unicorn that was actually a caricature of Bob Dylan,
Oh, okay.
which no one would know but me, because
But they liked your test?
they liked my test. It was ridiculously elaborate. It was 3 scenes, 2 pan moves,
Wow.
and a lot of action. This unicorn was galloping, skidding to a stop, and running the other way. I knew. I had studied animal motion. I'd taken an equitation course in Pepperdine.
Oh, okay.
And for no other reason than my own amusements, I'd spent a lot of time at Art Center just tracing my bridge. so I could do a pretty convincing gallop.
Oh, okay.
So from that, they decided that I had sufficiently a knack for it to take me out of just a training program and put me to in-betweening.
So you advanced, you
Yeah.
advanced fairly rapidly.
Yeah, because the rush was on at the end of Pete's Dragon, and an in-betweener was a highly useful thing.
Yeah. It's the last great start of the great golden age of Disney and everything else. That's
I would
sort
call it the Disney Silver Age.
well,
if
maybe
anything.
even the Copper Age.
Yeah. Well, yeah, one of the reasons we left Disney at the time we did was The Fox and the Hound was a kind of a mediocre film, which we were not unaware of at the time, but we were sort of looking down the tunnel at the oncoming train that was called the Black Cauldron, and nobody wanted to work on that.
No, I remember Don and Tad worked on that quite a bit.
Well, I did the one thing that I probably shouldn't have done. I read the books. Like I said, I'm a nerd as an animator, as a story person, as a character designer now. I have this thing for reading, and the book The Black Cauldron is magnificent, and almost none of that got into the picture. And it was it was sort of pre-disappointment, I suppose.
Yeah. Oh God, that went round and round and round and round.
And there was so little story at the end. It was it was really kind of a heartbreaker, because it could have been, had they had the nerve to just do the damn story. It's kind of one of the unfortunate things about Disney as a corporate filmmaker. They tend to believe that they know better than Victor Hugo or Hans Christian Andersen or history.
Well, that picture got, especially because you had departed at the time. It was these horrible internal struggles over that picture, and
Yeah.
it was not pretty. But so how much animation did you do on the small one? At the same time they were developing the Black Cauldron.
Yeah. That's kind of interesting, because I have an objective standard. To get the promotion to animator, you needed to get 100 feet into a picture.
Oh, really?
Yes, and I and 3 other women got that 100 feet into the small one. So at the same time I was promoted, Heidi Goodell, Lorna Pomeroy, and Emily Giuliano were all promoted, which is, it's kind of a milestone for women at Disney.
Oh, yeah.
Because we were the first 4 women to be animators since Retta Scott during World War II.
Right. And I mean, and of course, you're familiar with all those letters. If you're female, you can be an ink and paint, and it's like,
Yeah.
I get a lot of defensive mail saying, well, it's just, that's not really the. And I said, well, it is really the.
Yes, well, I'm willing to climb up a step or two and get in somebody's face about that, because I think those 4 people were as strong a group of animators as you were going to find during the Disney Golden Age.
Yeah, and I think, you and Lorna
Yeah.
have gone on to greater glory, and Heidi did a lot more things. And,
Yeah, she got into computer animation quite early.
Yeah.
And, Emily made a choice to stay in cleanup because of, concerns about her family.
Yeah,
And, I can't argue with that choice.
right. But, so, 4 women animators for almost the first time at Disney.
Yeah.
And you all,
Almost about it,
well,
yeah.
maybe in Rita.
Well, Retta, she was the one, she was the token,
And Mary Blair was the designer.
yeah. And, she is beyond all classification, I look at her work and it's just amazing.
Yeah, well, and that's the thing. And, there was a back and forth recently on the blog just about, the Penthouse Club, they chose to close it rather than admit women. And so, the whole thing, there was just, there was a culture. It was,
It was a
The
culture,
boys'
but you
club.
could say that a bunch of guys in a treehouse is a culture too, and it would be equally invalid.
yeah, oh yeah, well, it was the way it was, and unfortunately in a lot of areas it's still the way it is. But, so you swing off of the small one and on to the Fox and the Hound.
Yeah.
And are you assigned a character, or are you hopping around? Or designing chickens and?
Well, we did actually, I also designed a couple of characters for a sequence that, for a multitude of reasons, never actually got into the picture. But I don't think I ever.
What were the scenes?
Oh, I didn't animate on that. It was these 2 cranes. That were supposed
Oh
to.
yeah, it was Charo.
The infamous crane sequence. Yes, Charo in this.
So were you animating the? She didn't.
No,
really
I
have
did.
an
I
impression.
designed the crane, and Phil Harris was the other one, and we sort of based him on a marabou stork in feathers that were supposed to remind people of Travolta's suit in Saturday Night Fever.
That was Wolfgang Ratherman's last hurrah. On
Yes,
that
it
film.
was. And, I remember people, looking forward to this with real horror.
Well, Art Stevens was like having heart palpitations
Oh, yeah.
up on the second floor, and it was. Wooly, I always thought was right in that the picture needed something there.
Yeah, but
he
maybe
was
not
right,
that.
Not that.
Yeah.
Exactly right. That was not what it needed.
Yeah.
It needed something.
Mm-hmm.
That picture was saved because it had a good opening and a strong ending.
Yeah.
The middle,
Yeah, it's
not
kind of
so
shuffling
much.
around. Yeah, I'm kind of trying to remember what I mostly did on that picture, and I think it was mostly the birds. I remember doing some scenes with Chief, and one of the old lady. It kind of came up when we all left, because I ended up kind of by accident being the first person to resign.
Oh, really? Now tell me about that. That's really interesting because all hell broke loose when
It did.
Don
yes.
and half the staff walked out the door.
Yes. Well, we had. Well, when I got the promotion to animator, I knew about Banjo, and I knew that a bunch of guys were working on this clandestine film. But I didn't really feel like I could ask to be involved in this until I had proven that I could animate.
Yeah.
So when I got the promotion, I came to Don and said, "Can I work on this thing?"
And he said,
He said, sure. So he, it was sort of like going back to school because he set me to in-betweening for him.
oh, okay.
Because he was no fool.
So you were working at Disney by day
And
you were,
in-betweening his scenes by night.
did you get any sleep during this period?
Oh yeah. Because mostly I worked on the weekends.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, we didn't really have a deadline because we didn't have any funding until very near the end.
Yeah, yeah.
So it was kind of like, you know, whenever. But, you know, I knew the rudiments of animation, but working, you know, in-betweening for Don was, you know, was taking it up to a whole different level because Don's animation was a lot different from anyone else's.
Yeah.
He sort of animated in paths, circular paths.
Yeah.
So to in between a scene of Banjo doing a leap up where he spins, you know, that's of course an animation in and of itself.
Yeah, yeah.
So I sort of took it in those terms that of, you know, continuing the learning experience, and you know, eventually, of course, I did start animating, and you know, got scenes into Banjo as well. But back to resigning.
Oh,
we
yeah,
had
yeah. That was 1980, I think, wasn't it? That was
79.
Was it 79?
Yeah,
Towards the end?
I had just come back from a week on Dagobah. The guy I was dating at the time was a Lucasfilm employee, and he was working in what they called specialty publicity, which was the science fiction conventions.
Oh, okay.
A guy named Charlie Lippincott got the genius idea that we're going to get people excited about Star Wars like a year before the movie was finished. He was going to science fiction conventions with a presentation, and the people that lined up around the block were the people who were waiting for that film. So it became this huge phenomenon on account of that kind of advance work. So my boyfriend, Craig Miller, who is also an animation writer and producer these days, he was, he had the idea to do a big exhibit at that year's World Science Fiction Convention, which was held in Brighton. And this is when The Empire Strikes Back was still in production.
Yeah, and that was the next one.
Yeah. So we spent a week at Elstree Studios putting together costumes and production paintings and props, stuff like that. And it meant that we were on the set of Elstree Studios for a week.
Wow.
Watching the film being
set.
made. Yeah. The soundstage where the Dagobah set was the largest set in Europe.
Wow.
The largest stage in Europe. And this swamp was, you know, it was so big it looked like a real swamp. You know, if you didn't look
Up
past
the
like
rafters.
up about 50 degrees, you know, you thought you were on another planet.
Yeah,
So-
which was the idea.
Yeah. And it was the first time I had really seen the machine really work and working well.
Yeah, wow.
So I came back to, you know, from this experience to Disney, which suddenly was revealed as a kind of a small-time operation.
Yeah, oh yeah, at
Being
the time.
run by kind of
absolutely.
small-time people. So when Don said, you know, we have gotten the funding to finish Banjo and start a feature, I was kind of ready to, to make the jump into what Don, always termed this rowboat. The rowboat kind of rowing frantically away from the Titanic.
The mutineers.
Yes. Yeah.
Bye.
Yeah, the guys in the truck.
But how did you get to be the first one?
Well, Don explained that, all right, tomorrow, which was a Thursday, we are going to, at the end of the day, hand in our resignations. And the next day, if you want to follow us, if you want to do that, we would encourage you to, write something up you can hand to them.
And you had handed, he had already gotten funding at that point
Yeah.
for Secret of NIMH. So it wasn't like you're jumping into the deep blue sea.
No, exactly. They were sort of waiting for that before they would ask anyone to to quit a steady job.
Oh, sure. Sure.
And this was long before the animation business was as wacky as it is now.
Right.
So the next day, Friday, we all wrote our resignation letters, and Lorna and Vera Law were going to be the first. So they went into Ed Hansen's office. He was the production manager then. And I'm settling in, for a tedious wait until I could get in there. And I get a phone call. And Ed Hansen wants to see me. So, okay, I put the letter in my back pocket, and I go down to Ed's office, past Lorna and Vera, who are, sitting in the anteroom, waiting to get this over with.
Oh, because they haven't gone in to see him.
Yeah, and
they haven't submitted their resignation.
No. So, I was like, huh? So I get in. Ed is there with Art Stevens.
Yeah.
And they said, Don Bluth resigned last night. And what we would like to see if you would take on his scenes. Mostly the old lady. Human character, kind of had to be done right, and it was a very flattering thing to be thought, good enough to take that on.
Yeah.
It was also kind of false flattery because I wasn't that good, and
It was also desperate flattery.
It was, yes, it was. But I didn't really think I could do that at that point. I didn't have the knowledge really, and I had already kind of committed to this resignation thing that I said to them. It's really, really tempting, but I can't. And they just deflated as I gave them that letter. And
and then the deluge.
Yes, yeah, they were very nice, and we shook hands, and I went back to my office, and it's like, oh, what just happened? And yeah, everybody, joined the line. 12 people left that day.
How many total left?
I think 13. 13
So there's
people.
12 and then one probably the next week. And I
Yeah.
think Doris Lanford left.
Doris
also,
left, and Diane Landau, I think, was on vacation, and when she came back, I was like, "Oh, hi, Diane, we all left."
So she did too.
Yeah, so she did too. And it was all done, I think, by about 10 in the morning. And, the famous thing was, of course, that Ron Miller ordered us all off the lot by noon.
You can't quit, I'm firing you.
Yes. Yeah, so.
A reversal of the usual.
Yeah, so, off our little rowboat goes. And,
So what happened with Secret of NIMH? Did you immediately jump into that?
no,
or
we
was
had to
there-
finish Banjo.
Oh, okay.
And, NIM started, I think, well, that was like around September. I think we started Secret of NIM the next year.
Oh, okay. So there was a little lag there.
Yeah, and when I look at that film, what I see now is the energy of these people that were making this film. Working way above their heads.
Yeah.
Doing stuff that I don't think we could have done in the context of Disney.
Yeah. Well, everybody was free and full of energy and high ambition.
Yeah, and and that was a story that worked. In some ways, the script fixed some of the problems in the novel.
Mm-hmm.
The only problem I really have with the story is where, the part where Don, we discover, cannot tell the difference between science and magic. That's, I am perhaps a stickler. But it sort of starts out science fiction and then it becomes something else.
It becomes more of the fantasy magical.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you could also say that in the original novel, the ending is kind of an anticlimax.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
it's.
Well, from there,
From there.
Secret of NIMH, then you guys go into video games, right? Now, what did
Yes.
you animate on the Secret of NIMH before we get off of that? What were you a directing animator on that, weren't you?
Actually, no, I wasn't. We didn't really have units per se, but I ended up doing about 70% of Jeremy the Crow.
Oh, okay.
When one develops, kind of a knack for one character or other, like Lorna, did these wonderful, heartfelt scenes of Mrs. Brisby.
Yeah.
And, and I did the funny stuff.
Yeah. And then, well, and you were building on your bird chops from
Yeah,
Fox
it's
and the Hound, in a way.
if it's got wings, give it to Linda.
Yeah. Because I remember even up in my little tiny broom closet, it was like, oh yeah, Linda's doing the great stuff on the bird, on the sparrow.
Yeah, I know it's weird. I hadn't studied birds; I'd studied horses. Oh well.
But who knew?
Horses are like birds.
They're almost exactly the same.
Yeah, they've got four or something.
Okay, so you do Secret of NIMH. It comes out, and as I
And
recall,
tanks.
it didn't do all that well.
Yeah, for an interesting reason. Exactly the same reason that Cats Don't Dance crashed and burned. Because we'd started out doing a movie for United Artists, but midway through, United Artists was acquired by MGM.
So it was an MGM picture
Yeah.
by the end.
Yes.
And you probably
and-
got lost in the release shuffle.
Well, it's sort of what happens on the African veldt when a lion takes over a pride of lions. The first thing he does is kill the cubs. It sends all the females into estrus so he can mate with them. And movie companies work the same way. the executives kill all the things that are in production. They take the loss, they can write it off, and they put their energy into
Their
their
slate.
own movies. Yeah.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. And with Cats Don't Dance, Turner Animation was acquired by Warner Brothers.
Right, and they didn't
did
care.
exactly the same thing.
Yeah, so it was the same kind
Yeah.
of a deal. But then you guys went on and did
The
a
video
lot of
games.
video game animation, and did you find that kind of fun to do? 'Cause
Oh, I
Larry
found that. I
said-
found that a riot. Yeah, because it came to me when I was animating the scene of Dirk the Daring being killed by a giant spider. That we had the opportunity to do the most violent animation since Tom and Jerry. And we didn't have standards and practices looking over our shoulders, so we could kind of revel in it. Doing the games was a lot of fun until the studio crashed and burned again.
Yeah, that happened a lot with Don. He had
It
a lot
did,
of, lot of horses shot out from under him.
Yes, exactly.
But then there was a resurrection because you guys
Yes.
did American Tail.
Yes. Well, apparently Steven Spielberg had gotten his hands on a cassette of Secret of Nim.
Yeah.
And he had this property that David Kirshner had brought him
Yeah.
about these immigrant mice. And he was looking around for someone to do the animation. And he asked himself, I wonder if the guy who made Secret of Nim is still around. And as it happened, we still had, this kind of skeleton organization in Van Nuys, but we were about a week away from closing our doors entirely.
Really?
Yeah.
I didn't know. I knew you were close, but I didn't know how
Yeah.
close. So,
And so Spielberg and David came in with this movie for us to do. So, another spin of the wheel.
and Don was not a fool, so he jumped at it. And
Yeah, then, he, we ended up making,
now you can.
making
That's a
pretty
pretty good
good
movie.
Yeah.
It's pretty. It was a
Yeah.
fairly big hit.
Yes, it was.
And
What was funny was that we were already starting work on The Land Before Time, and we had moved to Dublin. So when An American Tail was actually released,
yeah,
we didn't experience anything of it. We
because
didn't
you were
see
at
how
that
to
time
see. Yeah,
in Ireland.
exactly. It was, as far as we were concerned, we'd released this movie into a black hole.
And what did you work on American Tail? Because I've seen that film and
Yeah.
it's charming. It works
It is,
really
yeah.
well.
Don had a habit of giving people sequences. He cast by sequence instead of
Characters.
So, what I mostly remember is the pigeon sequence.
Yeah.
What was it? Christopher Plummer decided to. It was this French singing pigeon who believed that he was personally building the Statue of Liberty. Okay, all right, we're all a little delusional sometimes. So he, brought out his Maurice Chevalier chops, and Don handed me this song because how she does birds.
Yeah, right. You were
Yeah.
you were the bird specialist by this time. Right?
Yes, and by then also I was considered a directing animator, so I was given these two Canadian guys, Ralph and Dick Zondag, to work on this sequence. I think it was because Don really thought it was funny to see the three of us together, because the Ralph and Dick are so huge, and
And you're the boss and in the middle and
Yes.
somewhat shorter.
Yes, yeah, I think he just thought that that was visually interesting. But they were both very talented, and the sequence worked out really well.
And was Don was fairly cooperative with what Stephen wanted to do on that film. That's what
Seemingly, yeah.
I was told.
Yeah,
Less so with
yeah.
Land Before Time.
yeah.
But I heard that it went swimmingly well, and they launched into their next film together in Dublin. So what did you do? Did you get away from the birds on Land Before Time? Because dinosaurs are a different
Well-
birds are descended from them, but
Yeah. Well, I developed the walk cycle for the Tyrannosaurus, essentially based on a cassowary.
oh, okay.
Yeah. So if you can think of Tyrannosaurus as essentially a big chicken with no wings, you're still kind of in that territory. But I also did this sequence of these little baby pterodactyls kind of fighting viciously with each other over a cherry.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. What was really funny is that, that's all, all this comic mayhem. It's, it's an amusing little sequence of scenes. But then Lorna had this scene of one of these little pterodactyls, trying to make Littlefoot feel better by, trying to give him the cherry. And it's this heartbreaking little scene.
Yeah.
And it's like, all that other stuff, who cares?
So what was the Dublin studio experience like? Was it
It was cold and wet.
It was cold and wet, but the studio itself, were you guys like totally different atmosphere than when you were in the valley? The same, somewhat different from Disney, I would expect.
Yeah, any animation studio is essentially an office where, people are doing their thing in cubicles. So, the atmosphere is what it is.
Yeah. Been over your light board.
Yeah, essentially, that is, I would say unchanging. I wouldn't say I had a really happy time there. I was having some rather sad things happen with my family. My stepmother died
Oh, that's too bad.
a year to the day that I left America.
Really?
Yeah.
Did you fly back?
Oh yeah. My sister, gave me a call one evening and told me that my father had just put her in the hospital. Actually, she was kind of heroic. She had stage 4 colon cancer.
Oh, jeez.
Her doctor told my father that she had about a month. And he didn't say this to anyone, least of all her. But she lived a year.
Oh, well, good for her.
Yeah, it was a difficult year, but she was just a very strong person.
Force of will.
Yeah, absolutely. The day that she couldn't go to her office was the day my dad put her in the hospital and just knew that it was over.
So that was right at the end, but she kept
Yeah.
going right up until then.
Yeah. It took about 3 weeks, but by which time I'd come back.
Yeah, yeah. Now, moving back to happier subjects,
Oh, yeah.
animation. How do you see that your animation evolved from your days animating at Disney? Because Don had a slightly different approach and a slightly different style, and how did you see yourself evolving from your neophyte days to your directing animator days?
Well, I mostly my big breakthrough as an animator, because I think everybody fights the same thing, which is that you tend to put too much into a scene. You know, when I look at my work, I usually say, well, you know, she should quiet that down.
Yeah.
One of the things I started doing was thumbnailing, and I got very good at figuring out when I had too many actions in a scene. You know, just looking at it in miniature.
Doing a little minimalist.
Yes, exactly. You know, when it took too long to sort of scan this little template that I'd made, I knew that, you know, I could throw this and that out, and that was actually something that led inexorably into storyboard.
Yeah.
Around 1990. I started asking for the opportunity to storyboard.
Yeah.
Because I wanted to be involved in bigger chunks of the movie. You know, I'd done character design off and on Rockadoodle. I got the opportunity for the first time to design a main character.
Yeah.
Because, you know, for the simple reason that every time Don drew a cat, it tended to look like Banjo.
Yeah.
So he said, you know, can you draw this character and just see if you can get it to look a little different?
Yeah.
So I came up with something that looked a little bit like a kid in a cat suit.
Oh, okay.
Which kind of suited.
Yeah, for the subject of the film and all
Exactly,
that. Yeah,
yes.
absolutely.
Which is, you know, kind of the thing I feel best about, you know, because it's one of those searing experiences. The day that Don killed Rockadoodle.
What did he do?
Well,
Because
when we started out, he had a really great idea. The idea of doing it's actually Ken Anderson, I guess, had come up with the idea of doing a version of Chanticleer.
Chanticleer, yeah.
And I think along with Secret of NIMH, actually, he was a big fan of Mrs. Frisbee and the Rats of NIMH. And I guess it was that was in the back of Don's head. You know, let's do something with Chanticleer, except let's make him Elvis. That's a great idea. And the idea of a rooster who thinks that he makes the sun come up until the pheasant that he's in love with disillusions him. That's a great story about the conflict between love and art.
And when did Don go wrong?
There came a story meeting, and he said, I've got to put a kid in this. And it was like, you know, that slow motion, no! Because then it becomes somebody else's story. It becomes a story about a kid. And it becomes two stories because, you know, it becomes, you know, it just destroyed this genius idea.
And nobody could talk him out of it.
Yeah, you know, it lost whatever sense it had, and, you know, apart from the research aspect of getting a chicken to move like Elvis, you know, there was nothing.
Yeah. What was the chronology? There was Secret of NIMH, followed by An American Tale, followed by Land Before Time.
The Land Before Time, and then
All Dogs Go to Heaven.
Well, the video game interval.
Well, the video game.
Before
I'm
the
skipping over
Spielberg
the video
stuff,
games.
and then yes, All Dogs,
after
and
Land Before,
Rockadoodle.
and then Rockadoodle after All
Yeah.
Dogs, and then
After that, A Troll in Central Park,
Troll in Central Park. At what
which
point
is where I jumped over the side.
so you jumped ship on A Troll in Central Park. Now, were you boarding? Were you storyboarding on Rockadoodle, or were you still animated?
At the very that was the very beginning of storyboard. I had a short sequence in the beginning of the movie where Chanticleer's desertion of his farm is explained, and a lot of crowd scenes and stuff like that. And on Troll of Central Park, I didn't animate on that. I don't think I did any animation on that. What I did instead was for about 6 months, I was the story department.
Oh, so you were basically doing all of the boarding then, huh?
No, I wasn't boarding on that, but I was writing.
Oh, okay, you were writing.
I wrote script on that because Don handed me some scenes with the Troll King and Queen, and I was also writing coverage for books that he that he was giving to me to read and make reports on.
Mm-hmm. Oh, okay, so you were sort of like the reader and the script writer at the same time.
Exactly.
So what caused you to jump ship?
Well, it was, it was a weird event, and unfortunately, John Pomeroy was kind of involved in this. He and I had been collaborating on the script pages, but Don was working in Dublin with another writer, and that other writer, whose name escapes me.
So were you here in town at
Yeah,
this point?
I was
When did
here-
you move back from
I
Dublin?
moved back at the end of All Dogs.
Okay, oh, okay.
So that was about 1988.
Okay, so you were working at the Burbank Annex?
Exactly.
Okay.
And so this other writer came to town, and John was leading him around the office, and he introduced me to him as one of the artists. And that enraged me.
Yeah.
He and I had been working on these typewritten-y things, and he couldn't tell this guy that I was working on the script, and it seemed like such flagrant disrespect
Yeah, yeah.
that,
You did another resignation scene?
well, I forget just what the continuity was, but I let Don know how angry I was, and he said, "Look, don't quit. I will talk to you." So I waited around a week, and he did not get back to me.
Right. Well, you were phone, right? Because he's in Dublin and you're in
right,
Burbank.
exactly. And after a week, I got tired of waiting and quit.
And what was John's reaction?
He wished me well.
Because it wasn't long after that that John jumped ship and went back to Disney.
It's kind of it's kind of a sad thing, because I think of the three of them, John probably had the best story sense, but I think Don
John
kind
Pomeroy.
of I think Don kind of beat the director out of him.
Yeah.
And he never really went to it. I think the world on his desktop was a bigger deal to him than it was to me.
Yeah. Yeah. So you you've parted company with Dawn.
I have,
and
yes,
This is
and I
after.
am, yes, I jumped out of the rowboat and I'm swimming
That's
for
after,
sure.
what, 11, 12 years together,
About
right?
10 years, yeah.
Yeah, 10 years, a
Yeah.
decade. So,
Yeah.
so where do you go from there?
Everywhere.
And
You know,
so you,
whoever will have me.
so you have worked in television animation.
Yeah.
You have directed.
Yeah.
You have been in and out of
A lot of
Disney
sequels to
tunes.
things.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And
You know, I have helped Disney eat its children.
yeah, that was the Sharon Morrill period where.
She who must not be named.
Yeah, well, she was, her record speaks for itself, so.
Yeah, it's an unfortunate thing. You know, her iceberg was probably Tinkerbell, and
Well, and John Lasseter was her.
oh
iceberg.
yeah, yes, definitely. But I remember my cubicle was around the corner from the bullpen where she sat in on the story meetings, and they were always having such a great time. You know, they were laughing up a storm. And by then, I had written a script for a TV special that Porchlight ended up producing. And I knew that if they're laughing, work is not getting done. You know, the story process is a lot of fun if you're just sort of like coming into the room every so often and having
looking
the
at
writers,
pictures.
yeah, you know, letting the writers entertain you and then going away. But you know, it's, you know, it is a focused process that's not about, you know, about entertaining yourself all the time.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So, as I remember when you were director at Disney Tunes, and you were.
Actually, I was
story
only a
person.
director at Disney Tunes for about 6 weeks.
Well,
And that
you're-
was on
but-
Mulan too.
But I remember that, and I remember there was a saying around there, if you were the first director on any of their projects.
Yes, you are
that
disposable.
You were like the first wave at Omaha Beach.
Yeah,
because-
you are the goat with the red fillet around its horns.
Yeah, and but I just remember that, and I just remember somebody coming up to me and saying,
Poor Linda, she's doomed.
no, somebody said, "Oh, Linda's the first one on this picture. That's not good."
Yeah.
You know, because by that time there was a reputation that if you
Oh,
were
yeah.
the first person on any of the pictures,
Oh yeah, I can
you
laugh
never-
about it
you
now.
never finished.
Yes.
And that must have been something preying at the back of your mind even then, wasn't it? That
You know, it wasn't because you know, I figured my arrogance would see me through. You know, I remember, you know, trying to figure out what they wanted of me because it seemed so damn mysterious. And, you know, to this day, I'm not quite sure why I was fired, except that, you know, the only thing I can really come up with was that I was not frequently enough telling Sharon that she was a genius.
yeah, well, that can happen. And
Yeah, I think so. You know,
your head wasn't embedded in her large intestine. That was the problem.
no, I suppose not. And I had perhaps the mistaken notion that it was a story about ancient China. You know, let that research impulse run away with me. In the project I'm on now, I've been sort of given the freedom to ransack the Disney canon for visual ideas, you know, as well as whatever I can find on Google, and it's set in fairyland, so it's not, it's not supposed to be specifically historical,
Right.
which gives one a certain amount of latitude.
But it's Northern and Central European kind of that stuff.
Yeah, it's kind of it's kind of down the street from Howell's Moving Castle.
Oh, okay.
It's sort of in that same neck of the woods.
And when you think back now, we're sort of skipping through this quickly, but I don't want to keep you all night.
Yeah, the cats are waiting.
When you after you left Dawn, as a business agent, I saw you everywhere. You were working on this television project, and then you were on at Disney Toons, and then you were, and you've principally storyboarded and designed and done some direction since you left Dawn's,
Yeah.
right?
Yes, and and had a chance to write to develop and write a TV special.
Oh, yeah.
Which I'm very proud of, also because it sort of brings the whole thing back to complete the circle, because that story, it's called A Martian Christmas Carol, is based on a poem that my father wrote when I was about 10 years old.
Oh, okay.
And somewhere in the contract it specified that he get a credit for the source material. And that was something I did with another storyboard artist named Alex Mann.
Yeah, I know Alex.
Yeah, a child of old Hollywood.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and we. The first people we pitched it to was Porchlight, and they bought it.
And you produced it and then directed it?
Well,
and-
no, we didn't. We wrote the script, took their money, shook their hands, and said goodbye.
Oh, okay. So you were on the front end, and then others took the ball and ran.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
I think the production moved from Malaysia to Mexico ultimately. But I looked at it, and I looked at the DVD, and it was like, seeing ideas that I had written but had not drawn, actually being visualized by somebody else, and that was a wonderful thing to me, because
Look at it with fresh eyes.
yeah, and to see something actually get out of my head and onto somebody else's desktop was a wonderful thing.
Wow. Now, the way I usually wrap these things up is your 5 in animation, your 5 most soul-satisfying things that you have done, and or the most inspirational things that you have, if not participated in, seen, that, it started out as what Disney, the subtext always was, what Disney features really inspired you? But we've sort of moved beyond that to
Yeah.
broadening the concept. So what, because you've had now a long career, you had a 30-plus year career,
Yeah.
what are the things that you look back on and say, that worked out well?
Yeah, how did that work out? It's kind of funny, because I got into the habit of not looking at the finished product. The storyboard artist, tries to visualize as cleanly and thoroughly as possible, and sometimes the animation is, not up to snuff, especially if you're working in things like television or DVD sequels, where production is going to be kind of hurried. But I directed a couple of episodes of Dilbert that it was
A primetime show.
yeah, it's a primetime show, and a show that I wasn't actually a fan of Dilbert until I worked on it, and I always used to say to people that working on Dilbert is quite a bit like being in Dilbert, but it was a case where a couple of times I had to ask my husband, who was a database administrator, how things on the computer looked when you did this, and he was able to supply me with that information that got into the show, and he was a big Catbird fan. So
Yeah.
it pleased him that I was able to do some Catbird scenes. In one
Well,
of
I have
those
always thought
episodes.
that the creator of Dilbert has gotten some good observations about life in the
Cubicle
offices of
workers.
the United States.
Yeah, absolutely. And, he's gotten to the point where his fan base will actually, tell him their stories. So it will work, into infinity, long
He has
after.
an endless supply of story fodder.
Oh, yes.
So, okay, so Dilbert,
Dilbert, a couple of years back, I worked on, I was hired to board a sequence on a Sony show called Hotel Transylvania.
oh yeah, it's Sony Pictures Animation.
Yeah, and there was actually not very much information to start with. So I had to develop the layouts, the incidental characters to dress this Romanian village square, choreograph the action, write some of the dialogue, and most personally develop the character of the heroine's kind of sidekick, comic foil, and sort of secondary lead. And it was a character that the screenwriters didn't quite get. He was this lonely, nerdish kid who was obsessed with monsters and hunting monsters.
Yeah.
And they were thinking kind of bouncing him off a live action character that somebody had seen before, and I said, no, he's my husband.
And they said, okay.
Yeah. Now, my husband died in 2008.
Yeah.
So this was maybe about a year and a half later, and I still have his gear. He was a scientist, a geologist, but he was also a man who was very interested in UFOs, a very spiritual man.
Yeah.
And a man who could operate dowsing rods.
Oh my God.
So, yes. I've seen him find water with those things.
Wow.
So I said, I use, my husband is quite a bit like this character, also a kind of a lonely, isolated boy.
So you push him in that direction.
I pushed him in that direction. I brought a whole bunch of his gear, his meters, his Geiger counters, his dowsing rods. He'd been thinking of doing a home environmental inspection business until his health gave out, but he still had a lot of the gear around, and the jacket. He had bought this technical jacket with about 27 pockets that I stowed like 30 pounds of stuff in.
Yeah.
Brought it to the office and unpacked it in front of my director and producer.
And so they bought it.
They said, "This is the character. Go for it." So
Well, terrific.
yeah, I have no idea how if the sequence is even going into the picture, but I was really proud of it, and I was able to make it personal.
Terrific. Now, quickly, give me 3 more or 2 more, however many. And it can be stuff that you drew inspiration from or worked on or whatever.
Well, okay, 2 more.
You talked about 101 Dalmatians before we
Yeah.
got started.
Yeah, which is, of all the Disney films, probably the one that's the most about drawing. Just seeing them explore this new process.
Yeah.
One cannot help but abase oneself before the glory of Pixar. I know Brad Bird a little. We've sort of worked in the same space for a couple of occasions. So I happen to think that The Incredibles is almost perfect.
No, I think it's about the best Pixar film, actually.
Yeah, which probably makes it pretty close to the best film ever. And the thing that is really wonderful about that movie is that it does something that animation is uniquely wonderful at, which is, in an exaggerated, very designed universe, telling an intimate story. The small story of how a family stays together within this superhero world.
Yeah.
And, that is the thing that has always fascinated me is, how do you make it a real experience? How do you use these finger puppets, to get audiences to say these are real?
Yeah,
And-
exactly. Whether
yeah.
it's CG or whether it's hand-drawn
Yeah.
or whatever it is.
Daffy Duck will live on longer than George Clooney.
No, I think you're right. I think there are some classic cartoon characters, Daffy being one of them.
Yeah, I mean, there are people who think Bugs Bunny is real.
Yeah.
It's not just marketing. These are personalities that are exaggerated, but there is some commonality of experience that animation does, and I don't think any other art form can do.
Yeah. Well,
So-
on that note, unless you have anything else you want to add,
Not really.
I think that ends us remarkably well.
Great.
Thank you, Linda Miller.
Well, thank you.